Welcome to Equal Ground Headlines, bringing you your balanced coverage on trending top stories in Canada. I am Samuel B. Williams. Clear news deserves a clear signal. Hit like, hit subscribe, and stay grounded. Alberta's election night frustration has reignited talk of breaking away from Canada. Yet experts stress the movement remains more political venting than a realistic road to independence. Premier Danielle Smith's new Bill 54 would make it far easier for citizens to force any referendum, including one on secession, just as new polls show roughly 1/3 of Albertans might vote to leave if the Liberals stay in power. Still, constitutional lawyers, political scientists, and recent history all indicate the province would face steep legal, economic, and political hurdles before it could ever exit Confederation or pursue the fringe idea of joining the United States. Below is a detailed look at why the debate flared up, what Bill 54 actually does, how much support separatism really commands, and what obstacles lie ahead. Election aftermath and the return of Western alienation. Liberal leader Mark Carney's victory on 29 April triggered an immediate spike in Western grievance rhetoric, amplified by former Reform Party leader Preston Manning's warning that another Liberal term could fuel a separatist movement in Alberta. Carney's win followed weeks of attacks from former U.S. President Donald Trump, who had taunted Canadians by inviting them to become America's 51st state. Many Albertans already felt Ottawa had neglected the oil sector and imposed costly climate policies. The election result sharpened those sentiments. Bill 54. Lower bar for citizen-led referendums. One day after the vote, the United Conservative Party tabled Bill 54, a package of electoral law amendments that would cut the signature threshold to launch a referendum petition from 20% of all eligible voters to 10% of those who actually voted in the last election, extend the signature gathering window from 90 to 120 days, and keep the rules broad enough to include a secession question if petitioners reach the new threshold. Premier Smith said the timing was coincidental, but acknowledged citizens could now put separation on the ballot without government sponsorship. But with the UCP's majority, observers expect Bill 54 to pass this spring. Relationship to earlier autonomy tools. Bill 54 would sit alongside 2022's Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act, which lets the province refuse to enforce selected federal measures it deems unconstitutional. Alberta Toxigevinheit. Together, the acts give Alberta the most aggressive provincial autonomy toolkit in Canada. How much support exists? Angus Wright Paul, 7 April 2025. 30% of Albertans said they would vote to leave Canada if the Liberals were re-elected, up from the mid-20s a year earlier. Angus Wright follow-up. Late April. Support falls to about 10 and 12% when respondents are asked the question outside the heat of an election. KV political scientists interviewed by KTV News estimate the hardcore separatist base is closer to 1 in 10 residents and lacks financial or organizational depth. University of Alberta Professor Jared Wesley calls the surge a protest vote driven by elites. not a true grassroots movement. Even former Conservative MP Lavar Payne, a separation sympathizer, concedes momentum will depend on how Ottawa responds to Alberta's demands. Constitutional roadblocks. The 1998 Supreme Court reference secession requires a clear majority on a clear question in a provincial referendum before negotiations can even begin. Center for Constitutional Studies. Constitutional Studies. Any final deal would need amendments approved by the federal parliament and all other provinces. A far steeper climb than Bill 54's provincial petition rules suggest. Last note, Alberta would also have to assume a share of national debt, renegotiate trade access to tidewater, and create its own currency, or adopt the Canadian or US dollar. The 51st state idea. Fringe, but headline-grabbing. A tiny subset of activists argues Alberta should petition to join the United States. Trump's social media post on Election Day reignited that fantasy, and local pro-annexation groups have held meetings south of Red Deer. Constitutional experts, however, say annexation would require a successful Alberta referendum, approval by the Canadian Parliament and every province, admission by a majority vote in the U.S. Congress. No Canadian province has ever advanced that far, making the scenario virtually impossible, according to University of Calgary law scholars. Why experts still say unlikely. Man, one shall see it in Terrain. Political columnist Graham Thompson calls separation talk a pipe dream, used to leverage concessions on pipelines and equalization payments. KT analysts add that business leaders fear an exodus of capital and uncertainty over trade with the rest of Canada. Even Bill 54's lower bar requires roughly 216,000 signatures. No separatist group has ever demonstrated the volunteer base to collect that many. What happens next? The UCP aims to pass Bill 54 before the legislature's summer break. But if it becomes law, activists could file a petition as early as autumn 2025. They would then have 4 months to gather signatures. Ottawa, for its part, says it will engage Alberta on energy and fiscal issues, but insists national unity is non-negotiable. Latest news and breaking headlines. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Carney has scheduled a First Minister's retreat in Calgary for June to address Western grievances, including equalization reform and faster project approvals. Found that thing.